Hi, this is Rabbi Orlofsky. Welcome to the Rabbi Orlofsky Show, episode 34. And I'd like to thank everybody for their warm outpouring of appreciation and support for our special Pesach program. It really pushed my producer to the limits to be able to get all these out every 2 days. And we broke records. Some of these episodes, if you add up all the numbers, over 10,000, close to 10,000. I have to find out how many people, and as I've mentioned in the past, more than one person is watching at a time, In fact, here in Yerushalayim, the first day of Chol Hamoed was cold and rainy. So people said that's what we did. We stayed home and we watched the Chol Hamoed podcast. That was our Chol Hamoed experience for that day. So Baruch Hashem, it was so nice to be able to share Pesach with everybody. And we're well along into Sfiras Omer now. So whether you're watching on Torah Anytime or wherever you happen to be watching or listening to your podcast, we're happy to have you. And we're going to be plowing ahead now through this Zman of Sfiras Omer. I first, of course, want to point out the tragic loss of Mrs. Lori Gilbert Kay, who was shot in the shul in Poway, California, in another shooting incident. And it was a story which, if you listen to it, actually had a tremendous amount of siyata d'shmaya. There's always siyata d'shmaya in any situation like that. Sometimes we look at situations that are tragic and we realize how much more tragic they could have been. There was a suicide bomber who blew himself up in Spiros in Yerushalayim some years ago. And the amazing thing is, and there were many casualties, the amazing thing is that there was a wedding hall in Yerushalayim that had collapsed. And because of that, inspectors went around to inspect all of the buildings in Yerushalayim, and they inspected the Spiros building, and they said, legally you're okay, but it would really be better if you reinforce this and reinforce that. And so the fellow says, listen, it's a lot of money, but I'll do it anyway. Better safe than sorry. So when the suicide bomber blew himself up, if that hadn't happened, the entire ceiling would have collapsed and many more people would have been killed. So, even in tragedy, you can see this to the Shmaya. And there's another amazing incident to this story, and that is that there were people in the shul who were from Sderot, who are under constant missile barrage. I imagine they decided to go to one of the quietest towns north of San Diego, California, figuring, well, at least here things will be quiet. There was a very chashuv family from South Africa who saw the crime in South Africa and decided to move to Los Angeles and suffered a home break-in and were tied up and shot and terrible things that took place. And, the answer is like a friend of ours, Abi. Abi was a Talmud of mine in Or Sameach, and he was in Yerushalayim when this suicide bomber blew himself up near Cafe Ramon, and he got shrapnel on him. And I remember one of my kids asked him, he says, does it hurt? So he says, no, but when it gets cold, the nail lodged inside of me gets cold inside of me. And so somebody asked him, says, so are you going to go back home? And he says, if there's a bullet or a nail with your name on it, it doesn't matter whether you're in South Africa or whether you're in Yerushalayim, whether you're in Los Angeles or you're in Poway, California. Everybody meets what's waiting for them where they're supposed to meet it. So in Mitzvah Hashem, it should be a refuah shleima with the people who are injured, and it should be, for all of Klal Yisrael Nechama, and we shouldn't have to suffer these terrible tragedies ever again. On the subject, this week's podcast is sponsored for the Yortzeit. The Eliyav family, their daughter's Yortzeit is Daled Iyar, and the thousands and thousands of people who are watching this podcast, it should be an Eloi Neshama for this young lady and a Nechama for the entire family. So I guess, the Sefira is a sad time, and laws of Avelis are observed. And listen, we have to take the strength from this, and we have to pick ourselves up, and have to remember that we're Klal Yisrael. An amazing story. Shlomo Zalman Auerbach's son was crossing the street in a crosswalk during the week of his daughter Sheva Brachos, and a bus hit him. He was legal. He was fine. And so the family sitting Shiva of Zelaznik, the elderly Rosh Hashiva of Eitz Chaim, comes in to pay a Shiva call with his cane, and he sits down. And everyone's wondering, what are they going to say? A young man, his daughter Sheva Brachos. He looks around the room and he says, "No, about 6,000 years, the Eibishter für the Welt." It's about 6,000 years that God is running the world. And he got up and he left. And everybody's trying to figure out, what was he trying to say? Finally, one of the children said, "This is a big kasha, but it's not the first kasha in 6,000 years. There have been a lot of kashas. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu still runs the world. And there'll come a day when we'll get answers to all of these questions." I don't know if it's true. It was one of these things going around, but there is a kinnah that was written of the Chav Daled cartloads of Gemaras that were burnt in France. And I did not check out the historicity of this, but I was told it was right in front of Notre Dame Cathedral. And the Rabbi Rottenberg wrote a kinnah saying, "Srufa be'esh," just as this burnt, that will burn. And when Notre Dame burnt, you think to yourself, HaKadosh Baruch Hu's got time. 1,000 years till things come due. But everything comes due. Eventually there'll be an answer to everything. And the death of Baruch Auerbach, and the death of Lori Gilbert Kay, and this young lady whose Yortzeit is Daled Iyar, and all of the sufferings of Klal Yisrael, there will come a time. The 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva, everything that's gone on, all of this will make sense. There will come a day when it will all make sense, when the lights will come on. Mirz Hashem, we should be zeichet to do that very soon. Okay, let's get down to what I wanted to tell you about today, and I'll put it into context. It's a story. I was speaking in a camp, a girls' camp, many years ago. And after the talk, so there were girls who were lining up to talk to me. And this one girl said, "I didn't come to your talk." I said, "Okay, I'm not insulted. I used to teach in seminary. Sometimes a girl would apologize for missing my class. And I said, you don't understand, if I'm giving out ice cream, and you said, gee, I'm so sorry I missed it. I know you really wanted to give me the ice cream. You don't have to apologize to me. I feel bad for you. You missed out on the ice cream." I used to tell these girls, I said, you understand that when you go to America, you have to pay to come and hear me. So every class you come to now, you're making money. You understand? This is appealing to the most basic Jewish experience. Yeah. When I was a kid, we used to go away to resort hotels for vacation. My wife went to bungalow colonies. It's an entirely different experience. Yeah. One time, someone lent us a bungalow. We went as a family. And I called up my brother. I told him I'm in a bungalow colony. And he was like horrified. He says, "What are you doing?" I said, "Sitting on the front porch listening to myself sweat." But we used to go to resort hotels. It was a whole different experience. We weren't living like refugees. in a resettlement camp. But anyway, so we'd be sitting in a resort, and I was a kid. You stay up late, and you want to get some sleep. And 7:00 in the morning, my father was pounding on the door, and he says, "You have to get up. It's breakfast." I said, "Dad, I'm not hungry." He said, "It's paid for." That's what you can see people at the end of the meal go, "I can't eat another bite, Do you want dessert?" "No, I can't eat it. It's included." "Okay." It's paid for. It's paid for. So the girl says to me, I didn't come to your speech. I was like, okay. She says, "Not only did I not come to your speech, I told other people not to come to your speech." I said, all right. It obviously didn't affect too much. So, and she says, not only that, there are people who were buying your tapes. That gives you an idea how old the story is. For those of you who are unfamiliar, before there were downloads, there were CDs. Before there were CDs, there were cassette tapes. I'm not going back to the LPs, but anyway, because I tell them not to buy your tapes. I said, okay. Listen, if you want to be upset at me, get in line. You're not the first, and you probably won't be the last. So finally I said, well, why does it that upsets you so much? She says, because I heard this tape that you made called Platonic Relationships. Open parentheses. I was asked to speak at the Sharfman Seminary here in Eretz Yisrael 25 years ago, maybe, on the topic of platonic relationships. Now, you may have gotten the impression while I've been doing this podcast, I don't shy away from delicate subjects, and I'm not a big believer in shying away from delicate subjects because someone has to speak about them. So when they asked me to speak about a topic like this to girls who obviously have issues with boys, now bear in mind, somebody showed me a survey of Beis Yaakovs all across the United States. What are the 10 issues that girls are struggling with? Number 1, this is going to be a surprise, sneers, that's right. Number 2, non-Jewish music. Number 3, boys. So this is actually a problem that affects many places. So they asked me to come and speak about the topic, and I was happy to come and speak about it. Now, I wasn't selling any tapes back then. There was no internet. It was, you could make a cassette tape and pass it around. Now, I was teaching in a boys' yeshiva at the time, and I come in the morning, and the boy said, wow, that was some unbelievable shiur you gave last night. I said, how do you know? He said, we got a copy of the tape. By the end of the week, every yeshiva and seminary in Israel had that tape. A Platonic Relationship tape. And I guess it was the first of my recordings to go platinum. And I understand now why, because someone had to speak about this issue. And since fools tread where wise men dare not go, I was happy to address the topic and address it as directly as I could so that people who are struggling with this issue. And I have met hundreds, and I'm not exaggerating, hundreds of people who have told me that they have made lifestyle changes because of that shiur. In fact, one time I met these 3 girls, and this one girl said, I heard your shiur on platonic relationships. I broke up with my boyfriend. Second girl says, me too. I heard you share on platonic relationship. I broke up with my boyfriend. The third girl opens her purse and takes out the cassette. Says, my mother makes me take this with me wherever I go. I said, what'd you think about it? She said, I never listened to it because I was afraid if I did, I would have to change my life, and I don't want to. By the way, the platonic relationship shiur is available on my website. It happens to be the most popular shiur on the website. Besides the podcast, of course. But the ones that of the shiurim that are downloaded, it's the single most popular. As I mentioned, it was the one that went platinum. So, okay. So she says, I heard your tape on platonic relationships, and you tell a story there. Now, this story is a Rashi in Avodah Zarah, which is referred to as Maisa Bruria. And if you've ever heard the recording, you can see when I mentioned the story, and I started telling the story about Bruria, some girls start cheering. That's because they came from a high school in New Jersey called Bruria. Yeah. And when I told the story, they're like, "No." I said, "Oh, they never taught you this one in school." Anyway, Bruria was a Talmid Chacham, the daughter of Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan, one of the Asara Harugei Malchus, and she was married to Rabbi Meir. And Rabbi Meir said the statement from the Chachamim, "Noshim daiton kalas hein." Women's das is light, whatever that means. We're not going into it now. And Bruria left. So Rabbi Meir says, "Okay." So he tells one of his Talmidim to go and seduce his wife. No, the Rebbe gesagt, Rebbe asked me to do something, I do it. Yeah. Now this was not going to be easy. Bruria was not an easy mark. The Gemara says that she was once walking in the road, and one of the Chachamim was on horseback and said, "Which is the road to Tzipari?" And she said to him, "Shoita." She quoted a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos that those of us in Eretz Yisrael learned this past Shabbos, and those of you in Chutz La'aretz will learn next Shabbos. So, Al tarbe sicha reisha. You're not supposed to be talking to women. You should have just said, "Where Tzipari?" That's enough. You're trying to schmooze me up here? So Bruria was not going to be an easy mark. Yeah. Anyway, he keeps at it, and I don't know what he did or what he said. Eventually, she agreed. And Rabbi Meir jumps out and says, "You see, Nashim Daitin Kalashain." And she killed herself. Now, obviously, Rabbi Meir did not expect that reaction. He never would have done it if he suspected that reaction. Anyway, that's the story, and I quote the story on the tape, on the shir. So this girl said, "That's the most disgusting thing I ever heard." Now, I didn't write this. None of the players in the story is me. Not Rabbi Meir, not Bruria, not Rabbi Chanina ben Trajan, not Rashi, not Avodah Zarah. I'm not involved in this at all. I was just saying over a Rashi. That was disgusting. That was horrible. How could you say something like that? I said, "It's not me. I was just quoting a Rashi." She says, "Well, that's horrible. Why would Rabbi Meir do that?" Says, "Because he said over a Chazal, and his wife laughed." So what? So what if she laughed? Who cares? Says he knew that she was a chacham, and he could argue, and he could bring a raya like this, and he could bring a raya like that, and he could say this, and he could say that, but until certain things are experiential, until you find yourself in that situation, yeah, the chacham said you should not read by the light of a candle because you might tilt it. Now, this has no meaning to us because our candles are paraffin. But in the old days, a nair was what looks like a little Aladdin's lamp. That was called a nair. Take a look at Rashi and Truma when he describes the neiros on the menorah. They're like a little Aladdin's lamp, and you fill it up with oil through the little, top piece over there, and you stick the wick through the little mouth where the genie comes out, yeah? And you stick it in over there, and when it starts to sputter, so the natural thing is to tilt it so that more oil will go into the well. And if you do, that's a malchut d'oraisa. So they say, don't learn by the nair because you might come to tilt it. You might get involved in what you're doing and not realize it. So the Gemara tells us this one time I felt, I know myself. I'm not going to do it. And he was loading by a nair and it started to sputter and he reached for it and he caught himself before he did it. And then he said the statement that I heard the first time from Dr. Schroeder, not in this, not in the same exact words, but similar. There's a reason they're called sages. Yeah. These people were smart. That's why they were called sages. They knew human nature. So that's what happened. So he knew certain things, unless you experience it, you don't know. And unless Bruria realized that even her, so frum and so smart, could be seduced, she wouldn't believe it. So she said to me, so what? So she wouldn't believe it. What does it make? What difference does it make if she doesn't understand that chazal? That was the question she asked me. And I'm using that to introduce the question that I want to deal with this week in the remaining 10 minutes that I have of my podcast. And that's the following. 24,000 Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva died out during the Yemei HaOmer. Or as the Gemara says, 12,000 sets. 12,000 chavrusas died out. Why? So Nogan kavod zelazeh. They didn't give kavod to each other. The Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva didn't give kavod to each other. V'yohavta l'reicha kamocha ze klal gadol b'Torah. That was Rabbi Akiva who said that. Yeah, don't walk in front of me, I may not follow. Don't walk behind me, I may not lead. Just walk beside me and be my friend, and together we shall walk in the ways of Hashem. Love your neighbor as yourself. That's Rabbi Akiva. And you think his Talmidim didn't have ahava for each other? Love is a strange thing. Because let us not confuse love with peace. What do I mean by that? Yeah. I love my kid so much, I don't want to fight with him. So my kid says to me, I don't want to go to school. That's fine, sweetheart. You don't have to go to school. I don't want to take a bath. You don't have to take a bath. I want to eat all the candy and all the chocolate I want. That's fine. I don't want to brush my teeth. Not a problem. I don't want to go to sleep. Fine. We have a term for that, a legal term. It's called neglect. And social services will take your kid away because it's a form of abuse. If I just want peace, I don't want to fight. Yeah? So the answer is shalom. What's the result of a relationship where people don't want to fight? Right? I know you're wrong. I know you're wrong. And you know that I'm wrong. Now, there's two possibilities here. Agree to disagree. I think that you're wrong, you think that I'm wrong, and that's fine. That was the level of kavod that the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva had for each other. They didn't want to fight. Yeah. There were 12,000 sets of chavrusas. And this set said, we learned the pshat like this. And the other one said, we learned it like that. And they said, oh, very nice. You learn it your way, I'll learn it my way. You understand what the result of that is? We would have 12,000 Torahs. No. Either I'm right and you're wrong, or I'm wrong and you're right. But that's it. There's only two possibilities. And we're going to fight it out until we arrive at the truth. Because that's what you want and that's what I want. And if I respect you, I will argue with you. And if I don't argue with you, it's only because I don't respect you. I will humor you. The easiest people to get along with are people who don't care about your opinion. I know a lot of people like that. People say things to me, and they don't care what I have to say. When I was younger, I thought that everybody cared about what I had to say, and I would share my opinion. And it took me a while to realize that most people don't care. When I used to teach how to answer basic questions on Judaism, I'd say you have to differentiate between what's a question and what's a statement. If it's a statement, you don't answer it. When a person says to me, well, I think, I just go, oh. Because you don't care what I think. You want me just to acknowledge your opinion. No problem. I hear what you're saying. And sometimes people will say, you hear what I'm saying? And I say, yes, I do. On rare occasions, they say, do you agree? And I say, no, I don't. But if they don't care about my opinion. And the fact that I don't argue with them between me and you is only because I don't have enough respect for them. Because if I really respected them, I was teaching in Discovery, and at that time it was like a 3-day seminar. And this guy came in on the second day. He was so angry. He goes, that Mayor Schuster, he's a cult. I said, really? He says, yeah. He says, I met him and he wanted me to come to this program, and I told him I can't because, I have to go back. And he says, don't worry, give me your ticket. I'll go to LL and I'll change it. This is in the old days when they had paper tickets, and you had to go down to actually change it. And he took my ticket, and I don't know where he is. That guy's a cult. I said, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I said, but here's the difference between him and me. At the time, there was a measles outbreak in Yerushalayim, if you can imagine. I know these things, hard to believe that in this day and age, such things can still happen after the vaccinations have eliminated measles, but you'd be surprised. So there was a measles outbreak. I said, so let's say I was hired by the city to offer free vaccinations, and I was sitting in a little booth with a big sign saying, free measles vaccinations, and people were walking down the street. I would sit in my booth, read, mind my own business. If anybody wanted a shot, I'd give them a shot. He said, if Mayor Schuster was in that booth, he'd follow people down the street, and he'd say, why aren't you vaccinated? Take a shot. It's not going to hurt you. It's good for you. It'll protect you. At your age, measles could be fatal. Yeah. Because he cares about you. I don't care about you. That's why I wouldn't do it. He says, then why are you here? I said, the money. I have no other way of making money other than by teaching Judaism. I use it as a shovel to dig with, as it says in Pirkei Avos. I'm not shy. He goes, well, it's very honest of you to admit. I said, no problem. If you care about somebody, you engage. If you don't care, you say, oh, okay. Lo nog and kavod zelazeh means that they didn't care enough to argue it out with each other. They treated each other very nicely. But if you really respect somebody, you fight with them, you argue with them. You don't just humor them. Rabbi Meir respected Bruria too much to humor her. It wasn't one of those relations where the wife says, I think that da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and the husband says, oh, okay, honey. Rabbi Meir had such respect for Bruria. He says, how could you laugh at a chazal? Because you think you're the great Bruria and it doesn't apply to you? I'm going to show you that it even applies to you. He, of course, didn't expect the reaction that he got. But his point was, either I'm right or you're right. But just to think I'm right and you think you're right, and the two of us to humor each other, this is a big problem. A big problem, especially for kids. Because you have two different parents who have two different philosophies about how to raise their kids. And either they're going to fight the whole time, and the kids are going to get caught in the middle, or one of them is going to just give up because he doesn't care enough. And one parent will impose their particular parenting style, and then if it turns out great, great. If it turns out terrible, it's terrible. What the other parent says, what am I supposed to do? The person's not interested in what I have to say. There's no sharing, there's no engaging. That's respect. That's real respect. If you care about somebody, then you owe them at least the opportunity to be taken seriously. To be able to say to them, do you really think that? And then you follow it through. How many times has it happened to me? This fellow says to me, I remember 1995, there was a Shabbat Olami all across England. The largest one was in Leeds University. Chief Rabbi Jonathan Sachs was supposed to be there. And at the last minute, he canceled because the Queen asked him to attend that weekend the 50th anniversary of VE Day. VE is, of course, Victory in Europe. It was in May. And so he went to attend. And so this is the largest one. They canceled. So they called me and asked if I would come. So I called up the Queen and I sent my apologies. And I went to Leeds. And by Shabbos lunch, this fellow sits down with me and he says, the chief rabbi was supposed to come. I said, I know. He says, if he came, I wouldn't have come. And I said, why is that? He says, because he doesn't like progressive Jews and I'm a progressive Jew. And I said, oh. And then he said to me, "What do you think about progressive Jews?" And I said, quite honestly, I don't know. We don't have it in America. Is it like reform? No, it's not like reform. Is it like conservative? No, it's not like conservative. And it took us about 10 minutes to conclude several things. One is he had no idea what progressive Judaism was, except that he knew that he was one, and he knew he didn't like the chief rabbi because he didn't like progressive Jews. And by the end of the conversation, he decided he was going to start keeping Shabbos and keeping kosher. All I had to do was engage him on his viewpoints. We talked about this in the Pesach podcast when we talked about the Russia, where you confront him and you say, "Yeah, why are you at the Seder? You don't believe in any of this stuff. Why are you doing this?" Force a person to confront what their issues are, what their views are. Does it make sense or does it not? Is it logical or not? I'm not saying to do it chas v'shalom in an aggressive manner or in a hostile manner, but you do it in a way where I'm having an honest discussion with people, and there are certain people who don't want honest discussions, and then you just say, "Oh," and move on. But trust me, the Talmidim of Rabbi Akiva could have engaged, just like Rabbi Meir engaged with Beruria. So, v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, kamocha, you love yourself. You want to be right. And I hope that you're intellectually honest enough that you're willing to examine if what you're saying is correct or not, and not just say, "That's my opinion," without thinking about it, without following it through. And that's it for this week. If you want to find out more about the show, please go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast. If you want to find out about this particular episode or leave a comment, it's RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast/34. If you want to find out about any upcoming events, RabbiOrlofsky.com/events. In fact, it looks like at this point I'm going to be in the United States after Shavuos. So if you're interested in an event, you could contact me. If you want to just contact me in general, RabbiOrlofsky.com/contact. And if you would like to sponsor an episode, go to RabbiOrlofsky.com/podcast and click on the sponsor an episode button. Thank you so much for listening. This is Rabbi Orlofsky, and this is the Rabbi Orlofsky Show.